The stars outside the observation window were quiet. They always were out here on the outer rim. But Commander Aaron Cole had learned a long time ago that quiet in space did not mean safe. It just meant that whatever was coming had not arrived yet. He stood with his hands behind his back, watching the slow drift of a distant nebula, its colors bleeding from deep purple into pale gold. It was beautiful. Everything out here was beautiful, in that cold and indifferent way that space always managed to be. Aaron had been watching skies like this for 20 years, and they still caught him off guard sometimes. "You are doing that thing again," said a voice behind him. He turned. Lieutenant Dana Pierce was walking toward him across the observation deck, holding 2 cups of coffee, her dark hair pulled back tight, her expression somewhere between amused and tired. She was young for her rank, 29 years old, sharp enough to see things most people missed, and honest enough to say them out loud. Aaron took the coffee. "What thing?" "The standing and staring thing. You do it when something is bothering you." He looked back at the window. "Nothing is bothering me." "The Dracovine crossed into the Polari border 3 days ago," she said, "and the Council has not responded. And we are sitting here on an observation ship that is not allowed to do anything except watch and write reports. So either nothing is bothering you, or you are very good at pretending." Aaron smiled, just slightly. "Maybe both." Their ship was called the Wren. It was a small vessel, clean and gray, officially classified as a neutral peacekeeping observer under the rules of the Galactic Accord. It carried a crew of 41 humans, a modest sensor array, and no weapons that any external scan could detect. Its job was simple: watch, record, and report. Nothing more. That had been humanity's job for a long time now. 200 years ago, after the border wars of 2180, the Galactic Council had introduced a clause into the Stillness Pact. The clause was polite in its wording. It spoke of balance and caution and the long peace. But what it really said, stripped of all the formal language, was this: humans are not allowed to fight anymore, not as punishment. The Council had been clear about that, in the way that powerful people are clear about things they do not fully want to explain. It was not punishment, it was precaution. Aaron had read the classified files from 2018 when he was promoted to commander. Most of what was in them was still hard to look at, not because of what the humans had done exactly, but because of how they had done it. The precision, the speed, the terrifying efficiency of a species that had spent thousands of years making war on itself and had, in the process, become extremely good at it. The border wars had lasted 11 months. The human involvement had lasted 6 weeks. The Council races who had watched it happen had gone very quiet afterward, and they had stayed quiet for a long time. The Stillness Pact clause had come 2 years later. Humanity had signed it without much argument. Some people back on Earth had been angry, but most had understood. You did not have to be cruel to be dangerous. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in the room was the one that did not want to fight, but knew exactly how. Aaron finished his coffee and set the cup down on the rail. "The Council is meeting today," Dana said. "There is talk that the Dracovine have been warned twice now and ignored both warnings. Some of the younger representatives are pushing for a military response. The older ones want more discussion." "There is always more discussion." "Ambassador Vass gave a speech this morning," she continued. "He used the words measured and careful about 14 times. He also reminded the Council that certain past examples serve as a reason for the current framework." She paused. "He meant us. He always means us." Ambassador Oren Vass was Velhari, a tall, silver-skinned species known for long memories and longer speeches. He had been representing his people on the Galactic Council for 60 years, which for a Velhari was not even considered middle age. He had been one of the strongest voices behind the Stillness Pact clause, and he had never made a secret of why. He did not hate humans, he was simply afraid of them, in the careful and respectful way that someone might be afraid of a very large and very calm animal that they did not fully understand. Aaron did not blame him. He might have felt the same way in his position. The alert on Dana's wrist communicator buzzed softly. She looked at it and something changed in her face. The amusement went away. The tiredness went away too. What was left was the expression she wore when something was actually wrong. "Sarah 4, she said. "A colony world, outer rim, populated by civilians from 6 different species. Family. It has a population of about 12,000. Aaron looked at her. "What happened?" "The Dracovine just entered its orbit," she said. "They are not responding to any signals, and the nearest council fleet is 4 hours away." Aaron turned back to the window. The nebula was still there, still bleeding purple into gold, still beautiful, still indifferent. Somewhere behind it, 12,000 people were looking up at the wrong kind of ships in their sky. He stood very still for a moment. Then he said quietly, "Get me a full sensor reading on Sarah 4, and open a channel to the council." Dana was already moving. The stars outside were still quiet, but Aaron could feel it now, the way he always could, like a pressure change before a storm. Something was coming, and this time, it was not going to wait. The sensors told a story that no one on the Wren wanted to read. Dana stood at the main console, her fingers moving quickly across the display, pulling up image after image from the long-range feeds. The pictures were clear enough. The Dracovine ships, 11 of them, heavy and dark, shaped like something between a fist and a blade, were positioned in a low orbit around Sarah 4. They were not firing yet, but they were not leaving either. They were doing what predators sometimes do before they commit. They were making sure there was no way out first. 11 vessels, Dana said, her voice steady even though her jaw was tight. 3 are capital class. The rest are mid-range assault ships. They have already jammed the colony's primary communication array. Civilian signals are getting out on backup frequency only, and those are breaking up. Aaron stood behind her, reading the same numbers, his face giving nothing away. "How long before the council fleet arrives?" he asked. 4 hours and 17 minutes. That is the fastest available response. "And the colony's own defenses?" Dana was quiet for a second. "Sarah 4 is a civilian settlement. It has 2 old perimeter guns and a shielding system rated for meteor deflection." She paused. "Not for this." Aaron nodded slowly. He had already known the answer. He had just needed to hear it said out loud. He walked to the communications station and opened a direct channel to the Galactic Council emergency chamber. It took less than a minute to connect. The face that appeared on screen was not one he had hoped to see first. It was Ambassador Vass, silver-skinned and composed, his long fingers folded together on the table in front of him. "Commander Cole," Vass said, "we are aware of the situation at Sarah 4. "Then you know the colony cannot hold for 4 hours, Aaron said. "I am requesting permission to move the Wren into protective position." There was a pause. Not a long one, but long enough. "The Stillness Pact is clear," Vass said. "Your vessel is designated as a neutral observer. Any movement interpreted as aggressive positioning would constitute a violation of the Accord. Protective positioning is not the same as aggression. In this context, Commander, the distinction is difficult to defend. The Dracovine have not fired on any vessel. They are, technically, still within the boundaries of a territorial dispute." Vass said the words carefully, the way a man says something he does not entirely believe but feels obligated to say anyway. "The Council is deliberating. We ask that you hold your position and continue to observe and record." Aaron looked at the ambassador for a moment. "There are children on that colony, Ambassador." Vass met his eyes through the screen. Something moved behind them. Not coldness, but something heavier than that. Regret, maybe. The kind that comes from knowing you are choosing a rule over a person and believing, with great difficulty, that you have to. "I understand," Vass said. "Hold your position." The channel closed. Dana did not say anything. Neither did the 3 other crew members on the deck. The silence was the kind that sits in a room after something has been said that everyone knows is wrong, but no one has the power to immediately fix. Aaron walked back to the viewport. Below, invisible from here but present in every sensor reading, Sarah the 4th turned slowly. A small green and brown world. Ordinary. The kind of place where people built houses and planted things and raised families without thinking too much about the size of the galaxy around them. He pressed a button on the panel beside him and opened the ship-wide channel. "All crew, this is the commander. We are in an observation hold near Sarah 4. You have all seen the sensor reports. I want everyone at their stations and I want this ship ready. We are not taking any action, but we are going to be ready to act the moment we are permitted to do so. That is all." He closed the channel. Dana turned to look at him. He could see the question in her face, but she did not ask it. Instead, she said, "The Dracovine fleet has moved 2 of the assault ships to a lower orbit. They are hovering over the colony's main settlement now." "Are they firing?" "Not yet, but they are broadcasting on an open frequency, demanding the colony's governing council surrender administrative control of the settlement and all resources within it." "And if the colony refuses?" Dana looked at the screen. "The broadcast does not say. It does not have to." Aaron pulled up a secondary console and began running quiet calculations. Not offensive plans, nothing that would violate any protocol, just numbers, distances, speeds, response times, angles. The kind of thinking that a person does when they are not planning to do something but want to be absolutely ready in case the moment comes when they must. He sent a short message to Earth Command. It was factual and brief. It listed the situation, the Council's response, the status of the colony, and the position of the Wren. At the end, he added one sentence, awaiting further instruction or change in conditions. He hit send and waited. The Dracovine ships did not move. The colony's backup signals kept breaking up, fragments of voices cutting in and out. At one point, a child's voice came through clearly for just a second before the signal dropped. It was not saying anything dramatic. It sounded like it was calling for someone. Dana heard it too. She kept her eyes on her console. 20 minutes later, Earth Command replied. The message was short. Aaron read it once, then read it again. He set it down on the console where Dana could see it. It said, "Acknowledged. Awaiting your judgment, Commander." Dana read it. Then she looked up at him. Aaron looked back at the sensor feed. The Dracovine ships were still circling, still waiting. They had noticed the Wren, of course. A human observation ship sitting close and doing nothing. To them, it probably looked like exactly what it was supposed to look like. Something that was watching but could not act. They had no idea how long humanity had been preparing for a moment exactly like this one. The first shot came without warning. One moment, the Dracovine fleet was holding position, circling Sarah 4 like a slow and patient storm. The next, a bright pulse of energy cut across the dark and hit the Wren on its port side. The ship shook hard. Lights flickered. Someone on the lower deck shouted and then went quiet. The emergency tone began to sound, low and steady, the kind of sound that means everything has just changed. Aaron was already moving before the echo of the impact faded. "Report," he said, his voice calm in the way that certain people get calm when real danger arrives. Not because they are not afraid, but because fear in that moment becomes something useful rather than something heavy. Dana was gripping the console with one hand and pulling up the damage assessment with the other. "Port shielding at 62%. No hull breach. Systems are holding." She looked up. "That was a direct energy strike, Commander, from the Dracovine lead vessel. Deliberate targeting. No warning." "Did it hit anyone?" 3 crew with minor injuries from the impact, nothing serious. Aaron stood in the center of the deck and let the information settle into him for exactly 2 seconds. Then he said, "Pull up the Stillness Pact, Clause 7, Subsection 3. Dana already had it on screen. She read it aloud, though she knew he already knew what it said. "The restrictions placed upon human military engagement are applicable solely to acts of unprovoked aggression initiated by human forces. In the event of a direct armed attack upon a human vessel or human personnel by any recognized or unrecognized party, said restrictions are rendered void for the duration of the conflict with that party." The room was very quiet. Aaron looked at Dana. She looked back at him. No words were needed. The Dracovine had just made a very large mistake, and they had made it because they believed, completely and without any doubt, that the ship in front of them was exactly what it appeared to be. a small, unarmed observer vessel crewed by a species that was not allowed to fight. They had not considered the possibility that the leash had simply been a choice. "All crew," Aaron said, opening the ship-wide channel. His voice was even and clear. "The Wren has been fired upon. The Stillness Pact clause is void. We are now authorized to respond. Everyone to combat stations. Execute Protocol 0. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the Wren began to change. It was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet and precise, the way the most serious things often are. Panels along the outer hull slid open in smooth sequence. Below the surface of what any scanner had previously read as observation equipment, systems came online that had never appeared on any external register. Shield arrays of a design that no alien engineer had seen before unfolded and locked into place. The ship's power signature shifted, growing stronger and deeper, like a voice that had been speaking softly for a long time and had finally decided to stop. The Dracovine lead vessel held its position. Then, after a moment, it fired again. The second shot hit the new shielding and scattered. The energy dispersed across the hull in a wide pattern and faded to nothing. On the Dracovine bridge, something had clearly gone wrong with their expectations, because the fleet began to move. Not toward the Wren, but repositioning, the way a group does when they are trying to understand what they are now looking at. They did not get long to think about it. Aaron gave 3 quiet orders. The crew carried them out with the kind of speed that comes not from panic, but from years of training for something everyone hoped would never come. The Wren moved. It did not move like an observation ship. It moved like something that had always known exactly what it was doing and had simply been waiting for permission. The first 2 Dracovine assault ships found their engine systems disabled in under a minute. Not destroyed, disabled. Precise strikes on propulsion arrays calculated to stop movement without causing structural collapse. The ships drifted, still intact, going nowhere. The third and fourth ships attempted to flank. Aaron had already accounted for this. The Wren shifted course in a tight arc that should not have been possible for a vessel its size, and the flanking maneuver became suddenly and completely useless. 2 more precise strikes, 2 more ships stopped cold. On the Galactic Council feed, which was still open and transmitting, the chamber had gone completely silent. 12 Council representatives were watching the sensor data from Sera 4 in real time. None of them were speaking. Some of them were not moving at all. Ambassador Vass stood at the edge of the viewing platform, his long fingers no longer folded neatly together but gripping the rail in front of him, his silver face difficult to read. Beside him, his aide, a young Velhari named Soro, was watching the numbers scroll across the tactical display. Ship after ship being stopped. No colony damage, no collateral strikes. Every action calculated, clean, and contained. "They are not destroying them," Soro said quietly, almost to himself. Vass did not reply for a moment. He watched the Wren move through the Dracovine fleet the way a surgeon moves through a procedure. Not with anger, not with excitement, but with a kind of focused and terrible competence. "No," Vass said finally. "They are not." Soro looked at him. "Is that better or worse?" Vass was quiet for a long moment, his eyes still on the screen. "That," he said slowly, "is exactly the question." Back on the Wren, Aaron watched the remaining Dracovine vessels pull back toward the far side of Sera 4's orbit. They were not fleeing yet, but they were no longer advancing. The colony below was still standing. The signals coming up from the surface were clearer now. The jamming had broken when the lead vessel lost power. Dana looked at the readout and then at Aaron. 6 vessels disabled, 5 still active but holding distance. "Good," Aaron said. "Open a channel to the Dracovine fleet." Dana opened it. Aaron leaned forward slightly and spoke in a steady, unhurried voice. "This is Commander Aaron Cole of the human vessel Wren. You fired on my ship. The legal framework that restricted our response no longer applies. However, I am offering you the opportunity to stop this now. Pull your remaining vessels back, release any personnel you are holding on the colony surface, and we can talk about what happens next." There was silence on the channel. Then, from the Dracovine flagship, a voice came back. It was deep and rough, and underneath the aggression there was something else now. Something that had not been there before. Uncertainty. Aaron waited. Outside, the stars were still quiet, but the Wren was no longer just watching them. The silence on the Dracovine channel lasted a long time. Aaron did not fill it. He had learned, over 20 years of difficult conversations in difficult places, that silence was not always empty. Sometimes it was the sound of someone realizing they had made a serious mistake and trying to figure out how large that mistake actually was. The answer in this case was very large. Finally, the Dracovine commander spoke. His name, as the translator rendered it, was something close to Vrak. His voice was deep and carried the kind of weight that comes from a lifetime of giving orders and having them obeyed without question. But there was something different underneath it now. A tightness, a careful quality that had not been there before the Wren had started moving. "You disabled 6 of my vessels," Vrak said. "You could have destroyed them." "Yes," Aaron said simply. Another pause. "Why did you not?" Aaron looked at the sensor feed for a moment. The 6 disabled ships were still drifting in a loose pattern, intact, their crews alive and unharmed. The 5 remaining Dracovine vessels had pulled back further in the last few minutes, holding a wide distance, not retreating, but no longer pressing forward either. Below them, Sarah the Fourth turned quietly, the colony still standing, its lights still on. "We remember what it cost last time," Aaron said. "We do not enjoy this." On the Galactic Council feed, which was still open, Ambassador Vass heard those words and went very still. Vrak did not respond immediately. When he did, his voice had shifted slightly. Not softer exactly, but different. The aggression had gone somewhere deeper, replaced by something more careful. "Your people were leashed," he said. "The Council forbade you from war. We assumed that meant you were no longer capable of it." "We were never incapable," Aaron said. "We were choosing not to." There was quiet on the channel again. Then Vrak said, "I need time to consider your terms." "You have 30 minutes," Aaron said. He closed the channel and straightened up. Dana was already looking at him. "Do you think he will accept?" "I think he is talking to us instead of firing," Aaron said. "That is a start." He turned to the rest of the deck crew. "I need someone monitoring those 5 active vessels every second. If anything moves toward the colony, I want to know before it gets there." He paused. "And get me a line to Lieutenant Greg Hale down in the shuttle bay. I want a team ready to go to the surface." Dana raised an eyebrow slightly. "We are still in the middle of a standoff." "The colony has been under threat for hours," Aaron said. "People down there are scared and hurt, and they do not have enough medical support. The moment there is a pause long enough to move safely, I want our people on the ground helping." He looked at her. "That is part of the job, too." Dana nodded and got to work. On the council feed, things had begun to move again. The silence that had held the chamber during the engagement had broken open into conversation, some of it heated, most of it confused. Representatives from 6 different species were talking over each other, pulling up data, pointing at screens. The numbers from the engagement were being reviewed and reviewed again, because several council members could not quite believe what they were seeing. An elderly historian named Counselor Benna, representing a small but ancient species called the Sorvai, sat apart from the rest and said nothing for a long time. She had been studying galactic conflict patterns for over a century, and she had access to records that most council members had never read. She pulled up one of those records now on her private screen, a file from 2018, and she began reading it carefully for the first time in many years. The record was a detailed account of the final phase of human involvement in the border wars. She had read the summary many times, and the summary said what everyone knew, that the humans had ended the conflict with extraordinary speed and efficiency. What she had not spent enough time with was the section at the end, the part after the fighting. She read it now. Humans had stopped short of total destruction in 2018 as well. They had disabled rather than destroyed where possible. They had offered terms. They had organized medical aid for both sides within hours of the ceasefire. They had not celebrated. They had simply stopped when stopping became an option, and then they had started helping. Benna sat back in her chair and looked at the live feed from Sarah 4. On the screen, a small human shuttle was making its way down through the atmosphere toward the colony's main settlement. It was carrying medical supplies and 4 crew members. One of them, she could see from the manifest, was Lieutenant Dana Pierce. Benna thought about what Ambassador Vass had said years ago, the argument he had always made for the Stillness Pact clause. That the humans were too dangerous, that their capacity for war was unlike anything the galaxy had encountered, not because they were brutal, but because they were disciplined. Brutality was manageable. Disciplined, restrained, precise violence from a species that could turn it off when they chose to, that was something else entirely. She had agreed with him then. She was not sure she agreed anymore. On the surface of Sarah 4, Dana and the small team moved quickly through the main settlement. The colony was shaken but intact. Buildings had been damaged in the early hours of the standoff, when the Dracovine had made low passes to intimidate. People were gathered in community halls and underground shelters, sitting close together, children pressed against parents, the particular silence of people who have been frightened for a long time and are not yet sure it is over. Dana set up a basic medical station in the largest hall with the calm efficiency of someone who had trained for exactly this. She moved from person to person. A Velhari family in the corner whose youngest was running a fever, a human couple whose apartment had partially collapsed, a Sorve elder who had hurt his leg trying to move people to safety. She treated each one without rushing, without making them feel like a task to be completed. A small girl, maybe 5 years old, human, sat alone near the door with her knees pulled up and her eyes on the entrance. Dana noticed her on the 3rd pass through the hall. She crouched down in front of her. "Hey," Dana said quietly. "Are you looking for someone?" The girl nodded. "My dad went to help move people when the ships came. He has not come back." Dana looked at the girl for a moment. Then she pulled out her communicator and contacted the crew member managing the colony's survivor tracking list. She gave the description. 30 seconds later, she had an answer. "He is in the shelter on the east side," Dana told the girl. "He is safe. Someone is going to take you to him right now, okay?" The girl looked at her. Then she stood up and took the hand of the colony volunteer Dana waved over, and she walked out without another word. Dana watched her go, then stood and kept moving. Back on the Wren, Aaron was watching the countdown when Varak's channel opened again. It had been 26 minutes. "Commander Cole," the Dracovine said. His voice was flat, but the aggression was gone from it entirely. "We will accept your terms. Our vessels will withdraw. Personnel on the surface will be released. We will submit to council judgment regarding this action." Aaron exhaled very quietly. "Confirmed. I will inform the council. Do not approach the colony again." "Understood." The channel closed. Aaron stood at the viewport for a moment, looking out at the drifting shapes of the disabled Dracovine ships against the dark. 6 vessels, hundreds of crew members, all alive, a colony of 12,000 still standing. He thought about 2180, about the records he had read when he made commander, about the reason humanity had agreed to the Stillness Pact without much argument. They had known what they were capable of. They had never been ashamed of it. But they had also known that capability without judgment was just destruction with better aim. And they had decided a long time ago that they wanted to be something more than that. On the council feed behind him, Councillor Benna had risen to speak. The chamber went quiet to listen to her. She was old and small, and she spoke slowly, but every word landed clearly. "I have been reading the 2,180 records," she said. "I think some of us have been afraid of the wrong thing." The Galactic Council chamber was fuller than it had been in years. Representatives from 47 species had gathered in person rather than by remote feed, which almost never happened outside of a formal summit. The chairs were filled, the upper galleries were packed with aides and observers, and the low hum of many different voices filled the air like a held breath waiting to be released. Everyone in that room had watched the sensor feeds from Sarah 4. Everyone had seen the same thing. But seeing something and knowing what to do with it were 2 very different problems, and the council was still working on the second one. Ambassador Vass stood at the central podium and waited for the room to settle. He looked older than he had 3 days ago, though that was not really possible for a Velhari. It was more that he carried himself differently. Something that had been rigid in him for a long time had shifted, not broken, but moved, the way a very old door moves when someone finally pushes it from the right direction. He began to speak. "I have spent 60 years arguing for the Stillness Pact clause," he said. His voice was steady, as it always was, but the careful formality that usually wrapped every word was thinner now. "I believed it was necessary. I believed the risk was too great. I built that argument on the events of 2180, on the records, on what I had seen and what I had been told." He paused. "I did not read all of the records." The chamber was quiet. Counselor Benna spoke yesterday about what the full 2,180 files contain. I went back and read them myself last night. Not the summaries, the full accounts. He looked out at the room. Humans stopped in 2018. Not because they had to, not because they were ordered to. They stopped because they chose to, and then they helped. I did not know that. I thought I did, but I had read only the part of the story that confirmed what I already believed. He stepped back slightly from the podium, and for a moment he looked like a man who was setting something down that he had been carrying for a very long time. "I am not here to call for punishment of Commander Cole or his crew," he said. "I am here to say that the Stillness Pact clause was built on fear, and fear is a poor foundation for law. I am calling for a new conversation." The room exhaled. Aaron was brought into the chamber an hour later. Not in restraints, not under guard, but as a witness, walking in through the main entrance with Dana beside him, both of them in clean uniforms, both of them looking like people who had not slept much but were not going to mention it. He stood at the witness position at the center of the floor, where the curved walls of the chamber rose around him, and 47 species looked down from their seats. It was the kind of moment that was supposed to feel enormous. It did, a little, but mostly it just felt like a room full of people who needed something explained to them, and that was a situation Aaron had been in before. The council chair, a tall and careful representative from the Marath species named Counselor Devan, spoke first. "Commander Cole, the council has reviewed the events at Sarah 4 in full. The legal question is clear. Your actions were within the bounds of the pact as written, given the direct attack on your vessel. What we are here to discuss is something larger than legality." He paused. "We would like to understand why you did what you did, not the mechanics of it, the reason behind it." Aaron thought for a moment, not because he did not know the answer, but because he wanted to say it right. "We agreed to the Stillness Pact clause because we understood why it existed," he said. "Humans have a long history of conflict. Most of it was with each other. We spent thousands of years fighting, and in that time we became very good at it. When we reached the stars and met other species, we could see how that looked from the outside. We understood the fear." He looked up at the gallery, meeting eyes where he could. "We were not angry about the pact. We thought it was a reasonable thing to ask of us, and we agreed to it freely. But we never stopped being prepared. Not because we wanted war, but because preparation is also a form of responsibility. You do not stop being ready to protect people just because someone asks you to stand back." He paused. "At Sarah 4, the pact was voided by their attack, not by our choice. When we responded, we tried to do it the way we believe it should be done. Stop the threat. Protect the people. Give the other side a way out if they are willing to take it. And then help whoever needs helping." He looked at Vass, who was watching him from his seat with an expression that was hard to name, but was not hostile. "That is not a strategy we came up with in the moment. That is just what we think the job is supposed to look like." The chamber was silent for a moment after he finished. Then Counselor Benna, from her seat in the middle tier, said simply, "Thank you, Commander." The vote came 3 hours later. It was not unanimous. 6 representatives voted to maintain some form of the existing restrictions, and their reasons were recorded and respected. But the majority was clear. The Stillness Pact clause was formally dissolved. In its place, The council adopted a new framework that had been drafted overnight by a small committee that included, at Vass's specific request, 2 human legal advisors. It was called the Accord of Shared Vigilance. Under the new accord, humanity would take a formal and open role in galactic peacekeeping, not as enforcers, not as weapons to be aimed at problems, but as partners, one voice among many, with the same obligations and the same accountability as every other member. The accord also included a clause that no one had expected Vass to propose, but which he had written himself. It said that any species joining the peacekeeping framework must submit their full historical records of conflict for shared study, so that the mistakes of the past could be understood by everyone rather than feared in the dark by each species alone. It was, Dana said quietly to Aaron when she read it, a very good clause. In the back of the chamber, seated in the small section reserved for non-member observers, the Dracovine representative watched the proceedings without speaking. He was a younger male, not Varrock, who had been recalled, but a diplomat sent in his place. He sat very straight and very still, and he watched everything with the focused attention of someone who was going to have to explain all of this to people who would not want to hear it. When the session ended and the chamber began to empty, he remained in his seat for a moment longer. A Velhari aide passing by asked if he needed anything. He shook his head slowly. "We thought their leash meant they were tame," he said, not really to the aide, more to the air in front of him. "We were wrong. The leash was their own choice." The aide did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing and moved on. Outside the council building, on a wide terrace that looked out over the city below and the sky above, Aaron and Dana stood together for a few minutes before the transport back to the Wren was ready. The city was bright and busy, full of species going about the ordinary business of their lives, which was exactly as it should be. Dana looked up at the sky. It was early evening here, and the first stars were becoming visible at the edges of the fading light. "Do you think the new accord will hold?" she asked. Aaron considered it for a moment. Not a quick answer, but a real one. "It will hold if everyone remembers today," he said. "Not the fighting, the part after." Dana nodded slowly. Below the terrace, a group of children came running around a corner. Different species, different sizes, making the kind of noise that children make when they are playing something that has very complicated rules that only they understand. One of them, a small human girl, broke away from the group and ran up the steps toward the terrace, chasing something that turned out to be a small round toy that had rolled ahead of her. She grabbed it, looked up, saw the 2 officers standing there, and gave them a completely unself-conscious smile before turning and running back down to her friends. Aaron watched her go. Dana did too. Neither of them said anything for a moment. There was nothing that needed saying. The stars were coming out one by one above them, quiet and steady, the way they always were. And for the first time in a long time, the quiet felt like something earned rather than something simply waiting to be broken.